Good evening and welcome to the Standing Resolution, the show where we take ideas seriously, even when the ideas involve milk. I'm your moderator, Justice Vale, and here's what's at stake tonight: language. Specifically, whether the words we use to describe things actually mean anything, or whether, with enough confidence and a good argument, absolutely anything can be anything else. It's a surprisingly high-stakes question dressed up in a very low-stakes bowl. Tonight's resolution, which our debaters will be defending and opposing as assigned, not necessarily as believed, I should add, because intellectual honesty demands we note that, is as follows. Cereal is a soup. 4 words, enormous consequences, possibly. On one side, we have a debater who will argue in the affirmative, that cereal does, in fact, meet the criteria for soup, and that your breakfast has been a soup all along. On the other side, a debater who will hold the line, defend the integrity of the soup category, and argue that cereal is cereal, full stop, and that some boundaries exist for a reason. Both sides were assigned their positions, which means what you're about to witness is pure argumentation.
Let's go back to basics, because that's where the real answer lives. What is a soup? Strip away the croutons, the steam, the grandmother's kitchen nostalgia. What are we actually describing when we use that word? At its core, a soup is a liquid-based dish in which solid ingredients are suspended or submerged. That's it. That's the architecture. A continuous liquid phase, solid components within it, served together in a vessel, consumed as a single dish. Every soup you've ever eaten fits that description, and nothing about that description excludes your morning bowl of cereal. Consider what's actually in front of you at breakfast. You have milk, a liquid base. You have solid pieces of grain, sitting in that liquid, softening over time, interacting with it. You eat them together from a bowl with a spoon. If I described that sequence to you without using the word cereal, and asked you what category of food it belonged to, the structural answer would be obvious. Now I anticipate the objection: temperature. Soup is hot, cereal is cold. But that can't be right because gazpacho is cold. Vichyssoise is cold. We don't exile them from the soup family because they came out of the refer.
Let me tell you what happens when you let definitions get too elastic. You pull on one end and the whole fabric unravels. That's not philosophy, that's just history. Holly's has offered us a very clean structural argument: liquid base, solid components, bowl, spoon. And I'll grant that it has a certain geometric appeal, but here's the problem. That same description covers a bowl of ice cream with hot fudge. It covers a glass of orange juice with pulp. It covers a child's cup of apple juice with chunks of cut fruit floating in it. Are those soups? If the answer is no, then the definition isn't doing what Holly's thinks it's doing. If the answer is yes, then the word soup has ceased to mean anything at all, and we've traded a useful category for a philosophical parlor trick. Words earn their meaning through use. They get their weight from the accumulated decisions of people who needed to communicate something specific. When a cook says, "I'm making soup tonight," something particular is being promised, a process, a tradition, an expectation. When you sit down to that meal, you know roughly what you're getting. That shared understanding is not psychology to be dismissed. It is the end.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Holly's has to answer for that ice cream sundae, and Mordecai has to reckon with the very uncomfortable possibility that intention alone can't hold a category together. The rebuttals are where arguments either harden into something solid or dissolve completely. Much like, well, you know, stay with us. Welcome back, I'm Justice Vale, and you're watching the Standing Resolution, where tonight we are asking in complete seriousness whether cereal is a soup. We've heard the opening arguments, the structural case has been made, the tradition has been defended, and now it's time for both sides to take a swing at what the other one built.
Mordecai made 3 moves there, and I want to take them seriously, because 2 of them are interesting and 1 of them is a trap. The interesting ones first. The ice cream sundae objection is genuinely clever. Hot fudge, solid pieces, a bowl, does that make it soup? No, and here's why. The liquid in a sundae is incidental. It's a topping, a garnish, a secondary element. In soup, the liquid is the medium. It's the environment the solids live in. Cereal milk isn't a garnish. It's the base. That distinction is doing real definitional work, and it rescues us from the Sunday problem without any special pleading. The orange juice with pulp objection dissolves even faster. Pulp isn't a solid ingredient suspended in a liquid base. It's the liquid, incompletely processed. That's a different thing entirely. Now the trap, and this is where I'd ask you to pay close attention. Mordecai argued that cereal wasn't intentionally constructed within the soup tradition, and therefore it isn't soup. But that's not how categories work. A category describes what something is, not what someone meant it to be. If I accidentally build a perfect arch, it's still an arch. Intention explains origin.
Holly's just drew a line between the liquid as medium versus the liquid as garnish, and I want to give that line its due because it's a real distinction, but notice where it leaves us. We now need a new criterion, one that wasn't in the original definition at all. We started with liquid base, solids, bowl, spoon. Now we need the liquid to be a medium, not incidental. Fine, but that's not a defense of the original argument. That's a retreat to a better one. And I'm happy to follow it there, because on that new ground, cereal still has problems. What is the milk in a bowl of cereal actually doing? In a soup, the liquid carries flavor, it transfers heat, it's the thing being seasoned and crafted. The broth in a chicken soup is doing work. The milk in a bowl of cornflakes is doing softening. It's a delivery mechanism for texture. That's closer to the role of the liquid in a bowl of ice cream than Holly's would like to admit. And on the intention argument, I want to be careful here because Holly's is right that categories describe what things are, not what people meant. But intention isn't just about origin. It's about how the thing was built and what it was built to do, an arch ha.
Holly's, you've argued that the milk is the medium, the environment the solids live in, and that's what separates cereal from a sundae. But here's what I want to press on. If I pour the milk first and add the cereal second, I've constructed that environment deliberately. If I eat the cereal dry and drink the milk separately, nothing has changed about the food itself. So is cereal only a soup when you choose to combine them?
That is a sharp question, and I'll answer it directly. Yes, combination matters, but that's true of soup too. A pot of broth sitting next to a pile of vegetables isn't soup yet. Soup is what you have when those elements are brought together into a unified dish. The act of combining is the act of making the thing. So when you pour milk over cereal and eat them together from a bowl, you have made the dish. That's when classification applies. The dry cereal scenario is actually my friend here, not my opponent's. Dry cereal isn't soup for the same reason dry pasta isn't soup. The medium hasn't been introduced. But the moment it is, the structure that defines the category is present. Cereal is a soup in precisely the same way that minestrone is a soup. The components are distinct. The combination is what creates the thing.
Mordecai, you've argued that cereal is a grain product served with a condiment, and that the milk is essentially incidental to the main event. But if the milk is just a condiment, what do we do with a classic French onion soup, where the broth is largely a vehicle for softened bread and melted cheese? By your own logic, doesn't that make French onion soup a condiment delivery system rather than a soup?
That's a genuinely good pressure point, and I won't dodge it. French onion soup is indeed built around the bread and the cheese. The broth is partly a vehicle, I'll concede that. But here's what saves it. The broth in French onion soup was crafted. It was seasoned, reduced, developed as a flavor in its own right. It is standing in the dish. Even when it's playing a supporting role, it's a principal ingredient that someone thought hard about. The milk in your cereal bowl came out of a carton and was poured without a second thought. It's a launching pad, not a collaborator. The difference isn't just structural, it's whether the liquid has been given any culinary intention at all. French onion soup is a soup because everything in that bowl was chosen to be there together. Cereal milk is an afterthought dressed up in medium's clothing.
Coming up next, the part of the show I genuinely love, and that both of our debaters have been quietly dreading. The Steelman round. Holly's has to find the strongest possible case against cereal being soup, and Mordecai has to make the best argument that it is. When your opponent's best weapon is in your own hands, things get interesting. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Standing Resolution. I'm Justice Vale, and you've rejoined us at the moment things get genuinely uncomfortable, the Steelman round, where each debater must set down their own argument and pick up their opponent's best one. The resolution is still cereal is a soup. Let's see who flinches first.
Here is the strongest case against me, and I want to give it the respect it deserves. Language isn't a logic puzzle. It's a living system, and it works because communities of people agree, over time, that certain words carry certain meanings. When that agreement breaks down, communication breaks down with it. The category of soup isn't just a geometric description of liquid and solids. It's a cultural institution, a culinary tradition, a set of expectations that cooks and diners have built up across centuries. When you say soup, something is promised. A warmth, a craft, a context. Cereal was never part of that conversation. It belongs to a different tradition entirely, one built around convenience and grain and the particular quiet of a morning kitchen. Forcing it into the soup category doesn't illuminate anything. It just muddies two perfectly clear waters. And if we're willing to override the lived understanding of language whenever a structural argument looks tidy enough, we've handed the keys to the dictionary over to logicians and locked out everyone who actually uses words to talk to other people. That is a serious argument. I've sat with it, and I think it deserves to land.
Here is the strongest case for the other side, and I want to mean it. The word soup doesn't come from a committee, it comes from use, and use is always changing. But underneath the cultural noise, there really is a structural logic to the category, and that logic does something interesting when you apply it honestly. Liquid, medium, solid components, unified dish, served in a vessel and eaten with a spoon. That's not an arbitrary checklist. It describes a genuine relationship between ingredients, the way the liquid and the solid act on each other, soften each other, become something neither one was alone. And cereal does exactly that. The milk changes the grain changes the milk, you eat what results. If you showed that process to someone who had never encountered either soups or cereals and asked them to file it somewhere, they would file it in the same drawer as minestrone. The structural case is real, and dismissing it as a parlor trick is the easy way out. I've taken that seriously, I take it seriously now, and I still hold my position for this reason. The structural logic Hollies describes is genuine, but it's also incomplete. Soup is not just a relationship.
We've heard both sides argue their own case, and then argue the other side's case better than they might have liked. Now comes the moment that actually matters, the closing arguments, where Hollies and Mordecai make their final, unencumbered case before you decide. Don't go anywhere. The verdict is yours, and it's almost time to deliver it. Welcome back. I'm Justice Vale, and this is the Standing Resolution, the show that started tonight with a bowl of cereal and ended up somewhere in the philosophy of language. We've heard the cases built, tested, and even temporarily surrendered. Now it's time for closing arguments. The floor belongs to our debaters one last time.
Here is what this debate has actually been about. It has not been about breakfast. It has not been about milk. It has been about whether we let honest reasoning lead us where it leads, or whether we stop at the edge of the familiar and call that a principle. Mordecai argued for tradition, for intention, for the idea that the milk in your cereal wasn't crafted and therefore doesn't count. But I'd ask you to notice what that argument requires. It requires that the same structural relationship between liquid and solid, the same interaction, the same vessel, the same spoon, means something different depending on who was thinking about it when. That's not a definition. That's a guest list. We resolved the temperature objection, gazpacho. We resolved the sweetness objection, fruit soups. We resolved the sundae problem by distinguishing medium from garnish. Every wall that was built, we walked through with a real answer. What remains standing on my side is simple and clean. Milk is a liquid medium. Cereal is a solid suspended in it. You eat them together from a bowl. That is the architecture of soup, and architecture doesn't care what you called it on the box. You've been eating so.
Hollies just said that architecture doesn't care what you called it on the box, and that's a vivid line. But architecture isn't just geometry. A cathedral and a parking garage can both be made of concrete and glass, both have roofs and floors, both shelter people from rain. The structure overlaps, they are not the same thing. What Hollies has built tonight is a case that cereal shares certain features with soup. I don't dispute the features, I dispute the conclusion. Shared features don't collapse categories, they just remind us that categories have edges and edges require judgment. The milk in your cereal was not made, it was applied. The grain was not chosen to live in that liquid, it was engineered to survive it long enough for you to finish reading the back of the box. Nothing in that bowl was built to be a unified dish. It was built to be fast, convenient, and eaten before the school bus came. Soup is a thing someone made for you. Cereal is a thing you assembled in 30 seconds. Language holds together because we agree that distinctions matter. Tonight I've asked you to hold one distinction in particular between a dish that was crafted and a dish that was poured. 0.
And that's where we leave it. Hollis Vega walked in tonight and told you that you've been eating soup for breakfast your entire life and simply hadn't been informed. Mordecai Quill held the line, defended the bowl, and asked you to trust what you already know. Both of them did something genuinely difficult. They argued a position with full commitment and then picked up the other side's weapon and used it honestly. That's not easy. I'm grateful to both of them. As for who won, that's not my call, and I mean that sincerely. I've spent this entire hour being aggressively neutral, and I'm not about to ruin my record in the final 30 seconds. The verdict belongs to you. It always has. If tonight's debate left you with strong feelings about breakfast taxonomy, or if you'd simply like to watch two very prepared people argue about something else entirely, come find us at Paxelle.tv. That's where you vote on the next resolution, and I can tell you from experience, the audience suggestions get stranger every week, and I mean that as a compliment. One thing before we go. The debaters you heard tonight are AI personas, and the positions they argued were assigned to them, not Cho.